So, I previously made a video regarding a tier list, but I decided to update the list completely for a celebration of 1k subs, so without further ado, let's get into it. This list will cover all the major characters as well as the side characters and the noteworthy ones. In the God tier, I'd put good Kasudius above them all, simply because... Jokes aside, first in the God tier would be Theocles. Now, we don't talk about Theocles we saw in the series. I mean the real Theocles from the comics who fought enemies on hours on end and sparked a prime enemies basically. I know, I love to use the word prime often. The Theocles from the comics in his prime days was a different breed altogether, man. It just had to be said, so he's a God tier. The Theo from the series was at 70% or 80% strength at best, or maybe even lower. We don't know, but he's been long retired as far as we've seen. And also, the Theo from the comics has been stabbed multiple times by enemies, and there is even a picture of it in the comics showing it, and he shows no pain at all, proving that Theocles is just a monster, man. Next up, we have Spartacus. Now, it's a close call between Spartacus and Gannicus in terms of their fighting skill. Gannicus is a nature beast on his own and never really seriously trained for a fight in the series, but Spartacus was seen fighting with a different arsenal too. We saw in a flashback in Season 4 War of the Damned that Spartacus fought with a spear and a sword, and Gannicus admitted Spartacus is atop of him by spear. So therefore, I give this one to Spartacus. But I'm not saying he's better overall, just when he is allowed to fight with a spear and sword type of combination. So Spartacus is after Theocles. Afterwards we have Gannicus. Gannicus is a nature root force, not requiring much training to be on par with champions. Imagine him training seriously and seriously devoting himself to being a gladiator. Given hand-to-hand combat, Gannicus is also seen to be on par with Spartacus, as we've seen in their fight, as well as the two-sword fighting style. Give Spartacus a spear though, and as said, odds might be a little different, even if Gannicus trains seriously. Spartacus is also the more strategic and tactical fighter in terms of intelligent fighting, therefore giving him the better edge in the long run. But there are two things I want to mention out. Sometimes people bring out that Gannicus fought the man blindfolded and is a beast and therefore a little bit above Spartacus, and that is true in a sense, but then we have to also consider Spartacus fought in the pits of the underworld, in which even Barca and Crixus talked a little in fear about when they told Varro. Therefore, they are both equal in that regard, but it's a really close call between them. Straight up looking at the facts, I think Spartacus has a little bit more of the upper hand.
And another event taking place was their fight against the Egyptian. Now I know Gannicus was taken by thoughts and not at his full strength when he fought him, but he needed something to happen, an incident which activated his Super Saiyan mode to defeat the Egyptian, whereas Spartacus chopped the Egyptian down in 3 to 4 seconds of combat with intellectual fighting, getting him to the ground and ending the fight as fast as he could. And he would have killed him right there if the Roman army wouldn't have intervened. But the plot didn't want the Egyptian to die yet. But then yet again we have another incident countering this one to give the edge to Spartacus. Because when Crixus and Spartacus fought in War of the Damned, Spartacus and Crixus seemed equal when doing hand-to-hand combat at the last few episodes, whereas Gannicus in the city at Sinuessa beat Crixus' ass easily. I mean, he chopped him to the ground and was about to finish him off if Naevia didn't intervene. That is also something to consider. Some therefore might take Gannicus over Spartacus too. There are just so many incidents in which one might be superior to the other, so I'll leave it up to you to decide which you think is better, Spartacus or Gannicus.
Animeus. Animeus is the Doctori of them all. He saw champions fall and rise on and on again. Animeus bested a prime Crixus and semi-prime, meaning yet not fully trained, Spartacus in episode 5 in Blood and Sand easily.
Pathetic.
This is also Animeus without having trained properly for a long time and only having taught as Doctori. The Animeus who fought Theocles was the true GOAT, but absent his knowledge he has now. Imagine him combined with his skill from then and his knowledge now. Though even post-injury Animes after the Theocles fight, Animes was no longer the champion. Gannicus was chosen afterwards. Gannicus, right now, the Gannicus we are talking in the series, is above Animes, but give us Animes in his prime days when fighting Theocles and still being champion, then he's mostly above them all, below Theocles. Maybe Spartacus can give him the edge, but we don't really know. Kerberos. He wrecked a prime Gannicus and semi-prime Crixus and could have easily finished the battle before Gannicus gained his Super Saiyan mode and wrecked this guy's jaw. I don't even want to imagine Kerberos under the instructions of someone like Animes with his size. Oof. Of course, other circumstances had played into account, as Gannicus had to fight his inner demons as he fought in this battle, with Melita and all that followed. A proper true Gannicus beats Kerberos ultimately, I think. The Egyptian. The Egyptian easily bested Animes and knocked him off, yet this was Animes injured and having the arena fall down on him, as well as taken by thoughts. Now prime Animes, the one who fought Theocles back in the day, easily and ultimately takes the fight against the Egyptian home. Why? Because I don't think that the Egyptian would survive against a prime Theocles for too long, and Theocles himself acknowledged the Doctori Animes as one of the strongest fighters he's ever faced, almost like a semi-god or a god himself. And this is ultimately why he didn't kill Animes in their battle, because he acknowledged his strength, dedication. There are yet so many possibilities, like the Egyptian being trained properly, Animes being with his Doctori knowledge, yet in the arena and still fighting, but this is all hypothetical. It's a really tough battle between them. I have to give this to Animes, cause he was the only one to fight Theocles in his primary strength and survive, where they fought for hours on end. I find it hard to believe the Egyptian could do this. For me, it's a close call between the Egyptian and Kerberos as well. Both have size, but the Egyptian is more agile. So it's a close call as said. His advantage though is the daggers, even with his sword, his curved sword, forcing him to do close combat mostly, and against Kerberos, oof, goodbye. Crixus. I think Crixus is a really great fighter, and surely has seen many fighting styles as well, giving him a great advantage as a champion. He fought a full equipped Egyptian with only a sword, which is a huge disadvantage against someone with 2 daggers. From the fights we have seen, I give the Egyptian the upper hand against Crixus. Give us Crixus with a shield and I'd put him equal or even above the Egyptian. It's a really even situation between the two. Okay, maybe it would be a little exaggerated to put him above the Egyptian if he would have a shield and be in his Ludus days. So I'd say they are about equal. Ulpius. Ulpius is the former Doctori of the House of Borealis and taught Animes and many other champions. Even though we only saw a shadow of his true self to become Doctori, he had to have been champion as well. So I don't take him as we have seen him, but I take him as in his champion times. Therefore, he deserves to be put up here, after Crixus. Even though Ulpius is the one to teach Crixus, I doubt he would beat Crixus in a fair one-on-one battle, so to say, but it's just guessing from here on, so he deserves to be put up here after Crixus if we take him in the series. Now, if we put him in his prime days, then I think Ulpius might even be above Crixus, but we haven't really seen much of him, therefore we cannot really decide it like this. One thing I give Ulpius the upper hand in though is that he has seen almost all fighting styles and unique ones. Therefore we can assume it gives him the ultimate advantage against someone like Crixus, who has seen many too, but not as much as a Doctori. But Crixus was a really strong fighter at the end of Gods of the Arena and beginning of Bloods and Sand. This Crixus would beat Ulpius most likely, unless we are talking about an Ulpius in his prime days, which we have seen nothing of, so we can't really talk about that. Barca. Barca is one of the top tier gladiators as well, being as long as Crixus and longer in the Ludus, as long as Gannicus. He is a master of spear, giving him the other advantage against most fighters. because of his range. I think he's above Agron in fighting skill since he has been much longer around in the Ludus and managed to survive long. He's also been said to be the second best after Crixus to be champion. Of course, he would struggle a lot against someone like Crixus or Gannicus, Spartacus, you say it, but has the upper hand against most because of his size and skill. It's a close call between Agron and Barca. Barca having the reach and height gives him the absolute advantage against Agron. It would be a close fight with an unknown outcome, but I give the edge to Barca here. Not too far behind is of course Agron. Agron is one of the top fighters too, and slowly gained in skill episode after episode, and was there until the very end. He had the best teacher basically, Spartacus. He was able to survive in the arena, mainly fights with a sword and shield, until he adopted his ladder fighting style in the end because of his injury. Agron is a beast and I would not want to face him in the arena as the opponent. I'd put Agron and Barca in the same tier, but give Barca the upper hand because of his range, as we've not seen Agron fight someone with a spear all so often if ever. Crassus. Crassus had only trained for a very short time in preparation for Spartacus, but the key example I want to take away from him is that he beat Hilarus, a former champion of the arena and still being in good shape and form thanks to Crassus and, him training Crassus. Crassus pulled the unforeseeable move on Hilarus and ultimately killed a gladiator, a champion. Therefore, he deserves to be put up here. Yet I would not put him above someone like Agron or Ulpius in no way, or even Barca.
Also, Marcus Crassus outright lost to a fully injured Spartacus. He had to fight a horde of Romans beforehand, whilst also having to have fought in the war prior before following him up the hill, and he beat Crassus. He even countered the unforeseeable move of Crassus which he used on Hilarus. An injured Spartacus countered that move easily. He straight up looked him in the eyes and said, "Doesn't work on me, buddy." And basically slammed him on the floor and was about to finish him off, before the man of Crassus then pierced some spears through Spartacus.
Though, if we take Crassus without this move, then Hilarus takes this fight home. Next up we have Hilarus. Hilarus was a former champion who was bought by Crassus, but him being champion means he has great skill and was a great gladiator to earn that title. Therefore, it fits him to be around Barca's level, as Barca was champion after Crixus and Gods of the Arena, or slightly lower than Barca and Crassus, as we've seen him in the series. Now, I wonder how was Hilarus in his true gladiatorial days. We don't know that, and neither will we ever do. Next up, we have Octus. Octus was a proper trained gladiator and a very strong fighter who had the size and range to his advantage. Now, something to consider is that he lost to Crixus before he was in his golden times, but still, Crixus was a different brute even then. Being trained in the Ludus under Ulpius, then Animaeus, ultimately gives him a great advantage as a proper gladiator against most who later joined the rebellion. Even against someone like Caesar, as most people they thought were not proper gladiators, because most gladiators from the Ludus were already non-present anymore in War of the Damned especially, as Spartacus even stated out. Now, I would even go as far to say that Octus could actually beat someone like Crassus too, but since he lost to Crixus, who was yet still in his beginner stages, I cannot say that. And therefore, he deserves to be put up in this tier. Caesar. Caesar had shown skill against fighting gladiators, but never truly in a 1 versus 1 battle, and Gannicus each time bested him. Only against Agron, Caesar proved himself a little, but ultimately, Agron would also kill him in the fight if prolonged in time.
Though I do have to give him credit in one certain battle at the end, in the last episode of the last season, when he fought Gannicus, because for some time at least he held his ground against Gannicus, but this does not in any way mean that he is on par with Gannicus at all. Just have to give him credit for being able to hold on for so long against the god of the arena. Caesar lost against Duna in a 1 versus 1 battle, and Duna was also injured, so Caesar had to play a little dirty to win that fight, but I don't want to take that fight as a 1 thing and say Dona is stronger than Caesar, because Caesar was then able to hold his ground against Agron for a while, who is certainly above Dona. Therefore, I don't want to take that for granted.
Next up, we have Dagon. Dagon was also a proper trained gladiator in Gods of the Arena, giving him a great advantage against most outside of the Ludus. He was a very aggressive but calm fighter, mostly. He didn't let his anger get over him except for the end when fighting Asher. That was a different story altogether. All about revenge. Other than that, he has beaten Asher with ease, and other gladiators as well, shown with great potential. He is definitely on par with even Octus, I would say. Though, then the spear is something Dagon didn't encounter as far as we've seen. He mainly fights with sword and shield. Varro. Varro is a sword and shield fighter as well, and actually showed great skill, and was able to kill gladiators in the arena when fighting alongside Spartacus. We never got to see what could have become of him, but with a little proper training, he would have been a beast. He has experience against different fight classes, since he practiced it with Spartacus, and who knows how often he fought in the arena off-screen time. What we saw was only a glance of his gladiatorial life, I guess, in terms of his arena fights. Therefore, I put him on par or even above Gnaeus.
Yet I have to say this is debatable, because Gnaeus was to be the chosen one to fight Crixus in the Primus, and Varro would beat Gnaeus if Gnaeus fights with sword and shield as during the test, but if Gnaeus fights in his original Triton and Net style, which he adopted later on, then he might have the upper hand against Varro, so it's debatable. Now, some people might even say that Gnaeus is above Varro because in the test, Gnaeus overpowered him a lot, and it ended in a draw, and this was Gnaeus fighting at a disadvantage because it's not his main fighting style, and he's basically bad with sword and shield as stated by animes, hence why he adapted the new fighting style. Yet, this was Varro at the very beginning of the series, same as Spartacus. They both improved episode by episode, day by day, training and training. So I don't take that Varro as for this tier list. I take Varro at maybe see episode 10 of Bloods and Sand when he was already seasoned.
Now, one key example to take away is also that when he fought basically Spartacus in the episode with the party, that he was able to cut Spartacus. Even though they both didn't really fight seriously, it's still something noteworthy of mentioning. Gnaeus. Gnaeus was a strong fighter, but strong in muscle, agile, and a good fighter with the Net and Triton. With sword and shield, he lacked quite the talent for it, as mentioned by animes as well, hence the switch. His weakness is his fast reaction, without thought like a crazy goat, as Spartacus mentioned and proved it. For me personally, it's a close call between him and Varro, as their fight was equal in the test and Gnaeus was there much longer by that time. Varro in the later episodes personally beats Gnaeus ultimately, in my opinion. Yes, Gnaeus is a great fighter and earned his reputation in the many years, as Borealis confirmed to Spartacus, but Varro with the sword and shield has the advantage against his fighting class. Pericles. Pericles was the champion of the House of Pompey. He was their champion, hinting that he has seen many fighting styles as well, and is not champion for no reason. He has great skill with Mormillo and is a good fighter overall, yet injured out of golden times Crixus was able to beat him, therefore in no way could he mess with any of the champions, in my opinion. Duna. Duna was a strong fighter, but we don't know much about him, and given his size, he could have been a gladiator too, or just a slave. He is very muscular, but at the end lost to Caesar. Even though he beat him almost whilst being injured, therefore I put him above Caesar, because he was able to almost beat him injured and only with one sword, and most likely hunger too. Sidulus. Now, Sidulus was a big as hell muscular fighter too, and it was unknown what kind of fighting styles he knows, yet he got chopped by Spartacus in a few seconds. This was Spartacus not even fighting serious in any way. Lugo. Lugo is also one massive of a guy, so I'd imagine that Caesar would struggle against him, as with Duna. The Caesar we saw fighting against Tuna was already in his top times, so I can't imagine Caesar beating Lugo, Sidulus, etc. You say it. So I'd even put Sidulus and Lugo above Caesar, if I'm being honest here. Because Caesar ultimately wouldn't really beat any above mid-tier gladiator in my opinion. Asher was not a great fighter, but still knew the ways of the gladiator in a way. Since he trained in the Ludus for long, he proved himself against the man of Glaba in close combat, and saw himself as the lowest of the brotherhood. This proved that having trained in the Ludus made true gladiators, and how fearsome it would be to fight them in a one-on-one battle. I think ultimately Asher would be overpowered by someone like Duna or Lugo in a one-on-one battle without any tricks up their sleeves. If tricks are allowed, then Asher would take this fight home against them all actually. Nazir. He is mainly a spear fighter and uses his size to his advantage in being agile, but that places him in a dangerous situation against the bigger opponents in a close fight. He's a very skilled fighter but showed to have problems against bigger opponents prior to his training. Could he beat Asher? I'm not too sure, to be honest. Yes, Asher was not the greatest fighter, but still he proved himself against Glaba's men, one of whom Nazir struggled against and was stabbed. But this was of course the Nazir that was yet not really training and didn't really begin his training. The Nazir we have at War of the Damned would ultimately beat Asher, Glaba. Glaba is a general and knows the fighting ways of the Romans. He is not a great duelist, but could most likely contest against many of the mid to low tier gladiators, such as Lugo, etc., unless being bested by their size. He could not compete against someone like Dagon though, gladiators from the Ludus.
Yet in one regard, Glaba deserves some recognition. That is when he fought Spartacus, because yes, even though this was a Spartacus not fully rested and fresh because he was up on the mountain and for God who knows how long hungered, he still managed to hold his own against Spartacus for a certain while, and we gotta say this was an enraged Spartacus who wanted to slice the head of Glaba, and Glaba still managed to survive for quite some time, I gotta say, so he deserves some recognition right there.
Glaba's general. He was always with Glaba, showed good skill in combat but lost to Asher in a fight, where Asher also fought multiple opponents, so I don't see him in the same tier as Asher simply because of that solely reason. An imprisoned Asher was able to beat him easily. I might even go as far as to say, to take away that I said that he has good skill in combat. Mira. Now, talking close combat, Saxa and Mira are very close as we've seen in their fight. But Mira mainly only uses a bow, therefore we take this as her main fighting style. She could easily kill Saxa since the latter has no shield in any kind of protective armor of that sort. Therefore Mira would be ultimately winning this fight if allowed to fight with a bow. Saxa. She's an agile fighter and could easily take down weaker opponents such as Roman soldiers and the likes, but would heavily struggle against someone like the Egyptian or simply someone overpowering her solely by size. Bariatis. Now, Bariatis is not a fighter at all, but we saw him killing a gladiator and fighting to hold his ground for a while, until Spartacus the GOAT came of course. Salonius. We saw Salonius had some kind of skill against Spartacus, which he himself even pointed out, but it was far from a skilled fighter. I give Bariatis the edge against him, because Bariatis actually killed quite a few in the outbreak of the Ludus. Pietros. Pietros had the mark of the Brotherhood, but was rather weak in comparison to any gladiator basically. How he gained the mark of the Brotherhood is a mystery, and I can't imagine it by, doing the test. Maybe he won the test in another way, earned it, but was seen unfit as a gladiator later on? We don't know. Now, we also have Cassinius and Furius, but I would not put them above any standard Roman soldier to be honest, as we've never really seen them excel at fighting or anything. Only on the horse when Spartacus, did his thing and slice him off. Cassudius. He has no experience in fighting or anything. Basically, if you see his face, you get angry. So let's put him away. Lucretia. Zero fighting experience, so she is to be put here as well. Same goes for Elithia. The magistrate, Numerius, I think we can stop right here, as we don't really have to consider them as fighters, but I still found it funny to put them in the tier list in a way.
Raskus. Now, Raskus was a really strong and kind of an aggressive fighter as well, and I would actually put him around the B tier, around the level of Varro too. I would certainly put him above Asher because he showed more skill than Asher had, and he actually fought in the arena and was able to fend off gladiators, and most likely had his fights off screen too, therefore deserving to be up in this tier. Navia. Navia gradually improved, but I would never put her above Asher or the above. Navia improved, that is true, but a seasoned Navia in the latest season struggled against Atius, whom Asher, for example, would easily put down. Also, she hit Atius from behind, giving her an advantage in killing him, and even though this was not the top-notch Navia we had in Vengeance at the end when fighting Asher, she still almost outright lost to him with an injured arm, because Asher didn't fight at 100% capacity since he had an injured arm, basically. Now, some more noteworthy additional characters which I just added to the tier list are the following. The gladiator from the beginning we saw who was killed by Sigivax. He was not great, but was eager to learn. He could have become a good gladiator to some degree, I guess. Next up we have the Man of Glaba. He was big in size and was portrayed twice in the series. Once against Spartacus and a second time when Tiberius was captured. Overall, an average fighter at best, as Spartacus with practiced swords bested him easily and played with him actually. Third, we have the Mercenary of Glaba, one who was killed by Gannicus, in which Gannicus also killed many of Glaba's men at the same time. Therefore, this mercenary is far from the level of the Egyptian, for example. Next up we have Indus. He was sentenced to the mines in a fit of rage from Bariatis. Never a champion, but not absent skill, like good Salonius, as stated by Ulpius, the Sicilian pirate. Easily bested by Gannicus, whilst Gannicus also bested his men. Well, he's not absent skill neither, but just an average fighter at best if you consider it realistically. Next up we have the friend of Spartacus from the beginning. He was an overall average fighter from the Thracians, not too much skill, as seen in the arena. Sigivax. Now he was far from absent skill, but was captured into the nails of Elithia, and sadly we never got to see what would have become of him, but he surely had the skill of a champion if trained properly. Next up we have Tiberius. Tiberius is not a great fighter in any serious way. He lost to Navia and never excelled in a fight really. Any low to mid-tier gladiator would beat him in a fight easily. Next up we have this guy. I forgot his name, but he was an overall okayish fighter too and deserves to be in this list. He fought in the War of the Damned season, in the last one, and was part of the rebellion later on. Sepia. Now, she never really exceeded in any fighting capacity, therefore she deserves to be ranked lowest, I guess. I mean, she was trying to kill Glaba, but that was all about what we saw in terms of fighting skills. Now, we also have Tullius. I mean, Tullius is around Bariatis level at best. I'm sure he received some kind of combat training and when he was, in his mid-aged times maybe, but we don't really know that. Duro. Even though Duro was not among the greatest fighters, even if at all, he was still a gladiator in the Ludus. I mean, he most likely couldn't beat any above mid-tier gladiator or even mid-tier gladiator at all, and would be rather ranked among the lower ones. Nemetes. Now, Nemetes was kinda backstabbed by Caesar, but also not, because when Caesar killed the other members of the rebellion, Nemetes and Caesar basically had a face-off, and Nemetes straight up lost that fight, even though he had all the chances to fight against Caesar. And I don't want to say it was really unfair, because they were face to face, and Caesar ultimately got him on the ground and was able to best him. Yeah. Anyways, this is my full tier list, and I would personally rank them all in this way. I would even put Theocles in a single tier if we take him in his prime, because nobody can really beat him if we think realistically, unless he's in his lutest times. Then of course Spartacus, and the latter takes the fight home.